Hello. We will begin the opening ceremony of 2022 INEB Conference. Please have a seat. And please check if your cell phone is muted or turned off. And you can also fold your back end of the cushion to make it higher and to make it comfortable. Welcome to INEB 2022 20th Biennial International Conference, Buddhism in a Divided World, Peace, Planet, Pandemic. We shall now begin the opening ceremony. First, Venerable Majule Bijitananta Bhikkhuni will lead the chanting, and everyone else will join.
Sadhu, sadhu, namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa Buddhang saranang gacchami Dhammang saranang gacchami Sanghang saranang gacchami Dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami. Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami. Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami. Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami. Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami. Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami. Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami. Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami. Panatipata veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Adinadana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Kami sumiccacara veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Musawada veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Serameraya majjapamadatthana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Idammi silang asavakkaya vahanoto sabbhe dukkha pamunccato. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Thank you for leading the chanting, Venerable. Now, let me introduce three distinguished speakers who will give welcome remarks. First, please welcome Venerable Pomyun S님, founder and guiding Dharma teacher of Jungto Society. Please give him a big round of applause.
코비드-19 이후로 이 INEB 대회가 이렇게 앞으로는 처음 열리는 것 같습니다.
It seems like this is the first INEB conference we're having post-COVID.
오늘 이 INEB 행사에 참여해 주신 비쿠 스님들, 비쿠니 스님들, 그다음에 오바사카, 오바시카 여러분들 이곳에 오신 것을 진심으로 환영합니다.
And I sincerely welcome all of you who are here attending the INEB conference, all the bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, and from other areas and other organizations as well.
오늘 참여하신 분 중에도 특별히 인사 말씀을 드리고 싶은 분은 아작 술락 박사님이십니다.
For all the guests here today, I'd like to especially honor and welcome Dr. Ajar Sulak.
박사님께서는 INEB을 처음 창립하신 주도하신 멤버이시고 나이도 90이나 되시는데 이렇게 몸소 이곳까지 참여해 주셔서 정말 감사드립니다.
Not only is he the founder of INEB, but at the age of 90, he has graced us with his presence, making his trip all the way to Korea.
그리고 INEB에서 오랫동안 활동해 주신 알란 세누키 선사님 그리고 질 제임슨 평화활동가님 그리고 닥터여 등 오랜 활동가 여러분께도 진심으로 환영합니다.
And I'd like to also welcome others who have been long-time activists in the INEB communities, including Reverend Allen, Venerable Smaranoka Matero, and Jill Jamieson.
그리고 제가 한국에서 가장 존경하시는 우리 도법스님께서 오늘 특별히 참여해 주셨습니다. 진심으로 감사드립니다.
And also the Korean monk that I admire the most in Korea, Venerable Dobo, he has specially graced us with his presence today, and I sincerely welcome that and I'm grateful.
세계는 지금 기후위기로 곳곳에서 자연재난이 더 크게 일어나고 있습니다.
Due to the climate change, we're seeing more and more natural disasters throughout the world.
또 코비드-19로 인해서 많은 어려움을 겪었습니다.
And we have faced great challenges due to COVID.
또 미국과 중국의 패권 경쟁으로 인한 우크라이나 전쟁 등으로 새로운 냉전에 접어드는 것 같습니다.
And we're seeing the emergence of a new Cold War era due to the great power rivalry between China as well as the U.S. and seeing the wars in Ukraine as well.
주민들은 환율이 폭등을 하고 물가가 상승하고 이자율이 높아지면서 경제 생활에도 많은 어려움을 겪고 있습니다.
And everyday people are facing great difficulties due to the great inflation, rising interest rate, and everything else that's challenging our everyday lives.
이런 문제를 해결하려면 각국이 서로 협력을 해서 문제를 풀어야 되는데도 오히려 세계 각국은 자기 나라 우선적으로 경쟁적으로 함으로 해서 문제 해결을 더욱더 어렵게 하고 있습니다.
Although we need a multilateral cooperation and collaboration among the great powers of the world to solve these problems, unfortunately, each country is looking out for its own and trying to prioritize its own interests, making the challenges more difficult.
이런 상황에서 우리 부처님의 가르침을 따르고 또 민중들의 고통을 해결하고자 참여하는 우리 참여 불교인들은 이런 문제를 어떻게 해결할 건지 이걸 두고 오늘 이렇게 우리가 모였습니다.
In the midst of all these challenges facing us today, all of you who have come here as engaged Buddhists try to collaborate and also communicate how best we can overcome these issues.
여러분들의 많은 활동 경험에서 우러나는 지혜를 함께 나누시기 바랍니다.
And I hope that you can share all that deep wisdom that you bring to us with your own experiences.
INEB을 이렇게 오랫동안 운영해 주신 INEB 이사님 그리고 운영위원들 그리고 스태프 여러분께 진심으로 감사드립니다.
Once again, sincerely thank all those involved in operating INES and keeping it afloat, including the chair and all the staff that's involved in making everyday operations possible.
그리고 이 서울 주관을 해주신 정토회 국제지부와 그리고 공동체 구성원 여러분께 진심으로 감사드립니다.
And also like to thank the members of JTS, especially the international department, who have organized and hosted, along with the staffs that you see here today, in making this event possible.
그리고 이곳 행사나 도북 행사 그리고 서울 행사에 식사와 모든 외부 후원을 해주신 정토회 멤버들에게도 대표님을 비롯해서 모든 회원들에게 진심으로 감사드립니다.
And including the representative of JTS and everybody else who has volunteered their time and effort and money in order to make this event possible, not only here in Tubuk and as well as in Seoul. I could thank them all as well.
우리들의 좋은 만남이 되기를 바랍니다.
And I wish a coming together of historic proportions at this event.
그리고 다시 한번 여러분들 이곳에 오신 것을 환영합니다.
And once again, I extend my sincere welcome to you all.
Thank you, Venerable Pomyin S님. Next, please welcome Ms. Kim Eun-suk, representative of Jungto Society.
안녕하세요. 세계 곳곳에서 오신 참여 불교인 여러분들 환영합니다.
Hello, I'd like to extend my welcome to all those engaged Buddhists who have come here from all corners of the world.
부처님 제자로서 평화와 인권, 환경과 복지 활동 등 같은 목적을 가지고 각자의 자리에서 열심히 하고 계신 여러분들을 한 자리에 만나게 됐는데요. 되게 영광입니다.
To see all of you as fellow disciples of the Buddha, to be working in your respective places of the world for human rights, for peace, for public service and welfare, to see all of you here today, I sincerely welcome.
금수강산이라는 말씀 들어보셨나요?
Have you heard of the phrase 금수 강산 in Korean?
네, 금수강산은 비단에 술을 놓은 듯한 아름다운 산천을 이야기하는데요. 대한민국의 산천을 비유하는 말입니다.
It's a phrase used to describe the beauty of Korean rural landscape. It means a silk embroidered silk.
금수강산 중 가장 좋은 계절이 가을인데요.
And fall happens to be the prime season for 금수강산.
네, 이 아름다운 가을 풍경을 여러분들과 함께 할 수 있어서 더 기쁜 마음입니다.
And to be able to share the beauty of the Korean fall in the countryside gives me great pleasure.
네, 정토에는 저를 포함해서 많은 자원활동가들이 참여하고 운영하고 있습니다.
Including myself, there are a lot of volunteers who are participating and engaging in the running of JTS, Jungto Society.
네, 이번 INEB 대회도 많은 자원활동가 분들이 정성껏 준비했습니다.
And so a lot of these volunteers came together to make this event possible in INEB.
혹시 부족한 점이 있더라도 널리 양해해 주시고요. 그리고 코로나 팬데믹을 넘어서서 오랜만에 만난 도반님들과 함께 좋은 시간 보내시기 바랍니다.
Therefore, I'd like to ask your forgiveness, understanding beforehand if there are any details that may be lacking in your comfort, in your stay. And having seen you here in the post-pandemic world in person gives me great pleasure as well.
네, 다시 한번 환영합니다.
Once again, welcome.
Thank you, Representative Kim Eun-suk. Next, please welcome Ajahn Sulak Sivaraksa, co-founder and chairperson of INEB's advisory committee. He turns 90 this year, but he's still strong, enough to handle the international flight from Bangkok to Seoul.
Can you hold it for me? Hold it. Speaking as a founder of INEB, most of my co-founders have gone from this world to the next world. I hope they are in the world of Amitabha Buddha. Only two are now alive. One is Pracha Hutanuvat, but he is so ill that he cannot come to this meeting. I hope we will send our best wishes for his recovery. And now only me, an old man. I hope I can make sense to you this morning, because the one who's supposed to speak this morning is Hansa Nauratne, the chairman of INEB. He is much more eloquent. He knows the divided world better than me. But since he is not here, you have to stick with an old man. But I'm sure Hansa will join us, and he will make the last speech, which I'm sure will be very impressive. Speaking of the divided world, you must realize that even during the time the Buddha, it was a divided world already. Particularly, the male dominate over the female. And worse than that, there was the caste system. The Brahmin over Kshatriya, the Kshatriya over the Vaisya over the Sutra. And worse than that are the untouchable. The Buddha did not tackle this directly, but he used his skillful means to form the Sangha. The Sangha is an alternative to the divided world. Both the male Sangha and the female Sangha, they all are in equality. That's the essential of the Sangha, equality. The next is fraternity. They relate between themselves like brother and sister, and they extend fraternity to the lay supporters. And the base of all the Sangha is liberation. Liberation from greed, hate, and delusion. This is not my idea. The idea came from Ambedkar, who became Buddhist in the year 1956. Ever since, millions of Indians have become Buddhists. And I think they are our hope. Those of us who belong to the older tradition of Buddhism, for 1,000 years, 2,000 years, we must look to these new Buddhists. They only have been here the last 60 years, and we should encourage them and collaborate with them. And as I said, the divided world in the old day and now is still divided. The oppressor and the oppressed, the powerful and the powerless. And oppressing now is not only among human beings. They oppress nature, which is the worst thing possible. You must realize that before the Second World War, the center of the United World was London. When the British Empire covered almost the world. But after the Second World War, although the British won the war, but they have lost everything. England has now become even less powerful than Germany. So the center of the divided world moved to New York, to Washington, but unfortunately, they went to make war in Vietnam without declaration of war, without any justice, and they were defeated by the Vietnamese. So, where is the center of the world now? Most people may not realize that the center of the world now is Davos, a small town in Switzerland, where top people meet there every year to see how rich they could become, how more progressive they have become. Luckily, there are people like the French monk who ordained in the Tibetan tradition. He went there every year to remind them that the more economic growth, the more the world going to suffer. And luckily, we have people like Stiglitz, who received the Nobel Prize in Economics, also demanding them. Indeed, if they have any sense, they should look to Bhutan, The fourth king of Bhutan said we should not go for gross national product. We should go for gross national happiness. What we need in the world is happiness. And with happiness inside, we can transform that to the world to see how we can change the structural violence in the world. Last, not least, I must mention His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Although his country has been oppressed over 60 years by the Chinese, yet His Holiness, who declared himself to be a simple monk, tell us that we must love the Chinese. I feel that to overcome the divided world, we must have love, we must have compassion, we must have wisdom, and we can use skillful means to overcome the divided world. I hope the people who attend this meeting, these two days, although we are a small group of people, but I'm sure we are beautiful people. And with these 2 days, we shall hear much how to overcome the divided world. We may not agree to each other, but we must listen to each other carefully. And I think with that listening, we can become friends. We become Kalyana Mitra. Kalyana Mitra are the one who tell you what you want to hear. And if you hear from Kalyana Mitra, we can breathe deeply to overcome our egoistic, to become less selfish, and to become more humble, and to become more useful to the divided world, so that the divided world become less division. The rich become less rich, the poor become better, and the oppressor to overcome the oppressor. I hope these few words of mine may not be useless altogether. And I'm very happy that you very kindly listen to an old man. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Ajahn. Ajahn, please wait. Ajahn will present a special gift from Bangkok to Venerable Pomyin S님. Pomyin S님, please come forward to the stage. Ajahn will present a special gift from Bangkok to Seoul. Ajahn, would you say a few words about this piece of art?
No.
Very good. Please give them a big round of applause. Many thanks again to all the three distinguished speakers for their welcome remarks, and especially the clarity and wisdom from Ajahn Sulak. And next, we will take a few minutes to watch video introduction to INEB and Jungto Society. The first video will be on INEB, and it will be about 10 minutes. And the second video on Jungto Society will be about 4 minutes. Thank you.
Our teacher, the Buddha, exhorted his disciples to come out of meditative seclusion and go forth into the world saying, Bahujana Hitaya, Bahujana Sukhaya, meaning for the welfare of many, for the happiness of many. in our fourfold Buddhist communities of bhikkhus, bhikkhunis, upasakas, and upasikas, we are supposed to follow this exhortation as our daily practice.
Engaged Buddhism actually started with the Buddha's instruction when he first set the first batch of monks, enlightened monks, 60 of them. The Buddha sent them out to the villages and he guided them with, be beneficial to yourself and to others. So it is very much the core concept of INEB, that is engaged Buddhist. You are practicing yourself, at the same time you also extend this understanding, this practice to others.
In the Theravada Buddhist world of South and Southeast Asia, the day starts with chanting the Parita, which includes the phrase Sappe Satta Bhavantu Sukhitata. That is, may all beings be happy.
You can say engaged Buddhist even if you are just engaged in your practice. If you practice meditation for yourself, that's also engaged. You are engaged with yourself. But you can go beyond. You can start helping people with small things, with a smile, with a kind word. You don't have to give dana all the time with, the offerings, but just to be kind to other people, just to be kind to all the sentient beings, including the animal. That's how you're going to start becoming engaged Buddhist.
In the Mahayana traditions of East Asia, people recall the Bodhisattva vows to work for the liberation of the countless number of sentient beings and call upon these bodhisattvas for help, benefit, protection, or to express gratitude.
So the term engaged Buddhism is developed so that Buddhism is actually an active part of life, something that is concerned about the well-being of many people and not just individual. So there's the idea of the bodhisattva, somebody who works for the welfare of others. So engaged Buddhism is that engagement in the world of suffering.
For years in these countries, the local culture had much to do with Buddhist spirituality and living in simplicity. But the present situation is now very different. With the advance of modernity, consumer culture, competition, and the struggle for identity and power, these traditional societies have withered away.
I think what Buddha has really taught us is to be really engaged. I personally feel that there are millions of people in the world who are suffering so much. So for them, when you talk about nirvana or we talk about the next life, it is a luxurious thought because they can't even deal with their daily life.
A few leading Buddhist teachers and activists have seen this happening, living amongst violent conflict, the destruction of the precious natural environment, the exploitation of the poor, the deterioration of values and culture, bad governance, hate speech, and dictatorship.
Engaged Buddhists, particularly in Asia, have responded to large, massive-scale suffering of the modern period. Thich Nhat Hanh is a Buddhist leader known around the world, and his voice came out of this industrialized warfare that took place in Vietnam. Socially engaged Buddhism tries to make a response to these kinds of sources of suffering.
These Buddhist leaders came up with alternatives for their Buddhist communities, some with voices so strong and powerful that they were heard not only throughout Asia, but across the West as well. One brilliant social activist from Siam called his Dharma friends to a historical boathouse and engaged in discussions until finally a team of spiritual friends or Kalyanamitta were formed. They decided to set up an international organization called INEB, the International Network of Engaged Buddhists.
In fact, we gather on the river Sakai Krang, the birthplace of my wife. We stay there almost 1 week, discuss together how to apply the teaching of the Buddha relevant to the modern world. That's how social engaged Buddhism was founded.
As they did at the boathouse, they decided to meet together every 2 years. At first, these gatherings were always held in Siam. But then INEB began stretching itself to hold such gatherings, first in Sri Lanka, then in Korea, Taiwan, Nagpur, Buddha Malaysia, and so on, to discuss the work being done in their respective communities and how to get more involved in the message and work of altruism for younger generations to carry on.
You know, there are so many organizations, Buddhist organizations, who talks about a lot of theological thing, a lot of other stuff, academic thing. But the difference is with INEB is mainly bringing people together, building up a platform where people can come, not only Buddhist, right? But even in other religions, other faith groups can come and sit together, talk about social issues, and bring back the real Buddhist value back into the life.
INEB engages with partners in holistic development work. Leading global organizations have begun inviting INEB to their high-level consultations to bring together problematic groups who do not wish to talk to each other, to talk as friends, to settle their issues. After decades of experience working with communities everywhere, INEB is now looking at a bigger task: to make a systematic impact for the next 10 years. What are the challenges that we must take on? How can we systematically face them? What is INEB's role in the larger scheme of social change work for diversity, ecology, social justice, and inner peace?
Well, what we are trying to do with next 10 years is, next 10 years now, most of us are elders, and we wanted to hand over this to next generation, right? So next generation is much advanced than all of us with scientific knowledge, with the modernization. It's going to be a different world. We are having a dialogue between youngsters, elders, and all of us, trying to build up a common platform which INEB can move for next 10 years, bringing a society where people feel good about each other and good about world, good about human being, and also protect the world, you see.
First, have time to breathe properly. In this day and age, we think too much. Perhaps stop thinking for 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Breathe in mindfully. Breathe out mindfully. Eventually, with this breathing, very simple, you can restructure your consciousness. You can change greed into generosity. You can transform hatred into loving kindness. You can transform delusion into proper understanding through proper breathing. Then don't remain sitting for out to see how people suffer. To be Buddhist, you learn to take yourself less seriously, to take others more seriously, and try to change things non-violently, mindfully.
Our 10-year vision is rooted in the Buddha's exhortation to go forward. Bahujana Hitaya, Bahujana Sukhaya. And we invite all of you to join with us.
What is the way for all of us to be happy together? In 1988, Jungto Society was founded with the aspiration of one practitioner. By adopting the original teachings of the Buddha as the core values and inheriting the legacy of the Buddhist reform movement and the Korean independence movement, he ultimately found the path to becoming a happy practitioner.
첫 출발이 나부터 행복하게. 두 번째가 다른 사람도 행복할 수 있도록.
A world where individuals are happy, society is peaceful, and nature is beautiful. One person's aspiration became the aspiration of hundreds of thousands of people and has spread from Korea to Asia and to the entire world. When you're happy, I'm happy too. We open the path for everyone to be happy together based on the Buddhist worldview of interdependence. Letting go of our egos, possessions, and obstinacy. Jungto Society is a volunteer-based community, and its members practice, donate, and volunteer. By sharing time and talent with one another and working together, we solve problems together. We pioneer new path of volunteering. The Peace Foundation, Good Friends, Echo Buddha, and Join Together Society practice the values of sharing and harmony. We provide relief aid not only in Korea, but also in India, the Philippines,
an island often depicted as an area of armed conflict, but more slowly rising to address the challenge of peace and development.
Myanmar, Afghanistan, and other developing countries, as well as North Korea. When Korea was on the brink of war, we held a peace rally with 10,000 people. Also, we led a campaign to submit a petition with 100,000 signatures to the White House, calling for a peace treaty on the Korean Peninsula. We take the lead in preserving peace. In order to save our planet Earth, we practice a frugal lifestyle of eating less, wearing less, and consuming less. At Jungto Society, each member acts as a small puzzle piece that completes a mosaic image of the Buddha. Each and every member has been part of small miracles in bringing about individual and social changes. The first 10,000-day practice that began on March 7, 1993, will finally come to a close on December 4, 2022, marking the end of a 30-year journey. Engraving the last words of the Buddha in our hearts, we will embark on another 30-year journey with the same mindset we first started out.
Such great videos. I am very grateful for those who made all of this possible, especially those who laid the groundwork of these two wonderful communities practitioners during the first years of these two organizations. Next is the keynote speech titled Buddhism in a Divided World. And please welcome today's keynote speaker, Mr. Sai Sam Kam, INEB Executive Committee member from Myanmar, and also PhD candidate at International Institute of Social Studies, The Hague, Netherlands. Please give him a big round of applause.
Good morning. Vahujana Hitara, Vahujana Sukara. Dear Ajahn Sulak, Venerable Punam Sunim, Venerables and Kalyana Mitra from INEB, I'm glad to see all of you again. I'm very grateful to Venerables Punam Sunim and Jungto for allowing us to be in this beautiful training center and for providing warm hospitality to all of us. And also thanks for sharing great compassion for the Myanmar people. And Jungto has been supported from the Rohingya to Kachin and Karen who are suffering from the impact of the authoritarian regime in Myanmar. I'm very grateful for the generosity of the donors and volunteers too. This is the first conference since the last Biennial Conference at the Deer Park Institute in India in 2019. COVID-19 started spreading around the end of 2019, and it turned into a deadly global pandemic for the following year. Sadly, we saw loss of millions of precious lives, including our loved ones, as well as the suffering brought to us by the lockdowns and economic breakdowns. I'm sure many of us are touched by these tragic experiences. Similarly, within the past 3 years, we saw how climate change affected millions of lives. For example, the flood in Pakistan or the drought in China, as well as violent political turmoils and wars. Despite these challenges, all of us are here, meeting again, all still alive, and continuing our mission to bring about positive changes in society and the world. It is indeed a blessing to see each other again and work together again. It is an honor for me to give a keynote, what I call thinking piece, for this conference. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Although I feel undeserved, I would like to offer some of my thoughts related to the key topics of the conference. To be honest, these are more questions from a Putujana than the answers to the problem that concern us. These questions trouble me for months and years, and to some extent, these are also the questions to the generation leading the Myanmar Spring Revolution. They are grappling with the same question. Indeed, they are questions around social justice and Buddhist ethics also. Some of us may resonate with me because the question I have are linked to our roles as engaged Buddhists, whether we are individuals or institutions, in the quickly developing threats from conflict, climate change, and the current and future pandemics. For the remaining time, I would like to go through some thoughts on the key themes of our conference: peace, planet, and pandemic, weaving between the local and global perspectives, from the divided Myanmar to the divided world. First, I'd like to start with the topic about peace. Recently, when I reread the book Dharmic Socialism by Prat Dhammakosa Sarya Buddhadasa Bhikkhu, I noticed that the editors of the English version commented how timely the book was, as humanity needed to change its course from destruction and annihilation by the looming nuclear wars. The book was first published in 1986. In 3 years, this book will be 40 years old. And yet, the concern for peace seems to be timeless. As if the history repeated again, we are gathering to talk about the tumultuous politics, conflicts, and how we can perhaps prevent them. Myanmar is literally burning while we are talking here. An area bombing by the military junta a few days ago instantly killed 60 people. The military then stopped wounded people to get access to health care. They blocked the road, didn't allow the wounded people to pass. So we are hearing more people died. Now it's around 100. One of the victims, it's an acquaintance I know for 35 years. He's a friend and classmate of my brother. So these violence are getting close to us, close to home. The constant risk of war in Korean Peninsula is a living nightmare for our brothers and sisters in Korea. The war in Ukraine is escalating every day, and there is the highest prospect of nuclear war in 60 years, which President Joe Biden of the United States warned, and approaching nuclear Armageddon. Wars were waged because of different positions in ideology, territorial claims, desire to access and control resources, sometimes because of the egos of the leader or their hatred or desire to beat a people into submission. Some wars were waged because of sheer greed to plunder a country, a land, or because of the imperialist desire to dominate through brute force and hegemony. At the same time, violent armed conflicts happen because of an enabling environment and the ecosystem benefiting from it. They are what Hannah Arendt would call banality of evil. They may be white-collar workers like some of us. They may go to their offices from 9 to 5 and then return to their family as a loving father or a mother. But they may be the same people supporting this war knowingly or unknowingly. Behind every war, there are businesses and industries directly benefiting from wars or authoritarian regimes such as Myanmar. Many of you will remember the US logistic giant Halliburton and its associate linked to the war in Iraq. They benefited $39 billion from their contracts with the US government. In total, contractors, including private security, logistic, and reconstruction companies, earned $138 billion from the Iraq war alone. Myanmar Brewery, which is owned by Myanmar military, has collaborated with Kirin Beer from Japan. One of its most famous products, Myanmar Beer, brought $22.7 million income just for the first 3 months of 2020. The investors of Kirin include prestigious investors from all around the world, such as the Norwegian Sovereign Fund. Norwegian government is one of the biggest donors of the multilateral Joint Peace Fund that supported the failed Myanmar peace process. Myanmar Oil and Gas Enterprise, a state-owned business with deep link to Myanmar military, has worked with Total, Shell, Woodside, and POSCO Daewoo. For 2019, the income from Total is $257 million. These are the money going into oppressing the Myanmar people. With such disposable income at their whim, without any concern for accountability, Myanmar military can do whatever please them, including that of the Rohingya genocide and the current war crimes against Myanmar people. The UN system is utterly useless to stop such brutality, including that of Russian invasion to Ukraine. My point is, for any war in the world, there are business interests as well as businesses bankrolling the war, and we need to hold them accountable. Some international governments are handing out peace funds, peace prizes with the left hand, and funding wars or selling weapons with their right hands. Let us see who has sold or selling weapons to Myanmar. From 1990 to 2016, according to a report from Al Jazeera, the biggest weapon supply to Myanmar military is China, Russia, Israel, Ukraine, and India. That is correct. You heard Ukraine. Until before the most Russian invasion, Ukraine supplied armored vehicles and missiles to Myanmar military that were used during the genocide campaign against Rohingya and other minorities. In 2019, an amphibious LPD warship from South Korea was transferred to Myanmar military with a price tag of $42.3 million. The warship can carry 3 helicopters, 16 tanks, and armored vehicles, and over 500 soldiers. This type of worship is used to conduct military operations in the river delta, such as Rakhine or Irrawaddy. The contract was negotiated in 2017 while the genocide in Myanmar was ongoing, and it was concluded after 2019. The ship is already in use by the Myanmar military. Now, the Korean police is at the advanced stage of investigating POSCO International, Daesun Shipbuilding and Engineering, and including Korean Ministry of Defense regarding to the alleged violation of Korea's Foreign Trade Act for selling a worship to Myanmar. I apologize for all the details, but these are to highlight how seemingly harmless businesses such as a beer company or an energy company can fuel the war and aggravate suffering of the people. You would not be surprised the arms suppliers to Myanmar also include some European countries such as France. France, China, and Russia, 3 countries out of the permanent 5 members from the UN Security Council, are supplying weapons to the genocidal military in Myanmar for years. How on earth Myanmar people believe this country want peace for Myanmar? How on earth UN Security Council will fulfill their mandate for the global security? This is an experience from just one country. I wonder what other countries would say. I think there will be no great difference. My question to all of us is what we can do in such situation as an individual, as institutions, as movements, as engaged Buddhists. How can we address the evidently contradictory role played by the UN Security Council and its permanent members? How can we hold them accountable? If the UN system doesn't work, what could be other alternative? At the same time, how can we hold the weapon companies accountable? We are dying by the millions because of wars, while the companies are reaping billions of profit, and they don't need to be accountable for a single life killed in war, beyond their PR campaigns and so-called corporate social responsibility. Another key concern I would like to raise in this conference, in terms of peace and stability, is the rise of what people call far rights, right-wing nationalism, and I would like to call it fascism. Some of these fascist political movements took the form of religious nationalism, such as the Mabata movement in Myanmar and Hindutva in India. The rise of the far rights are very apparent in Europe and in the US too. Italy has just installed a prime minister who idolized Mussolini. Polarization caused by political, social, and economic inequalities are the main reasons, as we know. These contestations often took violent forms. We do not need to recall our painful memories of the Holocaust or the World War II. How would the inward-looking, delicate, non-violent, meditating Buddhism address such violent forces? Apparently, liberal electoral democracy alone cannot solve the challenges posed by fascism. I think our commitment and moral responsibility is calling us to take on this issue. What kind of preemptive collective measures can we take to stop fascism from advancing? Now, please let me move to the issue of planet and the climate change. I would not go into detail about what is climate change and how it is affecting humanity and the planet. Many of us are familiar with the issue, and it is one of the repeated key themes in the INEB conferences. Here, I would like to highlight a few points for us to consider when addressing the climate change. We all know how our way of conducting economies, our patterns of producing and consumption needed fundamental changes. Not the quick fixes, definitely not the capitalist solution which are being proposed as technological fixes will solve the problems. It is also our attitude and the value that needed serious re-examination. Buddhadasa says, and I quote, "Those who hold the eat well, live well view do not have any limits. They are always expanding until they want equal to the gods or devatas. Those who hold the eat and live only sufficiently view represent moderation. Whatever they do moderately. This results in a state of normal or balanced happiness. They will have no problem of scarcity and there will be no selfishness. End of quote. The Master's comment in stark contrast with the consumption and consumerism, which drive the growth economy. His comments disagree with the proponents of free market economy, neoliberal capitalism. As we can also see and learn from Jungto Society, mindful consumption, it's an important practice we all can learn from. At the same time, we must be cautious that climate change is turning into a politic and an industry in its own rights. It is a billion-dollar business, including renewable energy solutions, carbon capturing projects, climate-smart seeds, climate-smart agriculture, and many other green solutions. Some of these solutions are not wrong in itself, but many initiatives are causing harms to the community, especially for those in poor countries or poor agrarian communities. If we are not careful, we will fall into victims of the capitalist solutions for climate change. Some of these good intended but poorly thought through or implemented projects are called greenwashing or green grabbing. A few years ago, a national park in northern Myanmar was expanded with the support from an international conservation group in the name of addressing climate change. It caused so much pain for the ethnic minority people there because they are being kicked out of the national park. There are many literatures highlighting how renewable energy policy in developed countries cause land grab for palm oil, sugarcane, and maize production, especially in poor countries with very little land tenure security for local farmers. So renewable energy policies are causing land grabbing all over the world. Climate-smart seeds or climate-smart agriculture technologies are controlled by the corporates, not the farmers. So what is the sustainability about that? In Myanmar, controversial hydropower dam constructions were shoved under the renewable energy proposal in the nationally determined contribution NDC document following the Paris Climate Change Agreement. I wonder what other countries in this conference have to say about their own experiences. Many of us are promoting agroecological farming practices, food sovereignty, and farmers' movement to address the issue of climate change and food security. Many of us know that farmers, agrarian justice, food justice initiative must go hand in hand with climate justice. In addition to that, I would add land justice is another very important issue for us. We must be cautious to look at not only the physical land grab, but also how land is being defined and who is controlling the meaning making of land. This is because if someone can control the meaning of land, they can change the meaning to grab the land. Some did that through changing laws and policy. During Myanmar's experiment with democracy from 2010 to 2020, we have many land laws being made. In 2012, vacant, fallow, and virgin land law has been made. But who defines what is a vacant, fallow, or wasteland? In 2016, during NLD's government rule, which is considered as, more civilian, more democratic kind of government, but they still changed the law and rejected customary land practices of ethnic minorities. Within 2 months after the revised law was enacted, when the impossible deadline to apply land registration was expired, millions of smallholder farmers become landless. Legally, they are landless now. Over 47 million acres of land, which is defined by the state as vacant, fallow, and virgin, which just mean that an undocumented land used by the generations of small farmers who practice customary land tenure are now ready to hand over to the companies who can pay the price. This is the biggest legal land grab in Myanmar's history. and a state's encroachment over the right of indigenous people and their self-governance. Changing the land laws, giving land registration and land lease is how land has been taken from the farmers who are using and carrying it for generations. Now they got a piece of paper with limited duration for access, 10 years, 20 years, and limited rights. Before that, land, it's life for them. They inherit it from their grandparents, from their parents, and they can hand it over to the next generation. But now they have a limited access to it. This kind of land commodification is what we call market-assisted land reform. This has been proposed by the neoliberal institution, neoliberal government, and international NGO, and by the UN to the smallholder farmers, especially in the poor countries. In the climate change politics, small farmers are being blamed as carbon producers and polluters, while big agribusinesses are being promoted for their efficiency and therefore given priority to get access to land. That is a widespread global policy which we must be very careful. Land is not just for agriculture and any kind of production. It has many other functions as a social reproduction, culture, and spiritual values. Rights to land is right to life itself. I hope INEB can engage more in the issue of land rights. Fundamental to agroecological farming to address climate issues, we must remember that the struggle of farmers are not technological or bureaucratic alone. Rather, it is a political issue and we need a political solution. We are not together in the problem of climate change. I would like to repeat, we are not together in the climate change problems. Poor people suffer more than us. Poor people suffer more than the rich people. Therefore, any proposal for climate change solution must recognize their voice and their rights to represent themselves. Us or the NGOs or the UN or the government cannot represent the poor people or the indigenous people. Now please allow me to move to my comments on pandemic. Rob Wallace, an epidemiologist and an evolutionary biologist, combined study of epidemics with political economy and social studies when he investigates how certain viruses emerge, how they manage to quickly spread, and what are the social economic conditions that allow pandemic to happen. His studies find the capitalist mass production of food, especially poultry and pork, are the key area of concern. So pandemic does not just come from nature alone. It was assisted by our capitalist way of producing food. When structural adjustment in Africa forced industrial agriculture expansion into the deep forest, the sensitive ecological balance has broken and reserves of new pathogens are being exposed. That's how Ebola emergence has linked with economic policy and capitalizing of agriculture in Africa. When big agribusiness and monoculture took the land and the mainstream food production, rural farmers have nothing left. They are forced to engage in marginal food sectors, such as wild food. So they kill the animal from the forest, or they catch them and sell them in the urban markets. Meat produced by the corporates and big farms are selling next to the wild animals and bush meats. Wallace has written a book with a provocative title, Big Farms Make Big Flu. In 2016, since then, he predicted pandemic in the mode of capitalist food production and people's mobility is inevitable. It is not if, but a matter of time. For now, he warned that we are not getting rid of COVID-19 pandemic yet, as many of us want to believe. And I'm very grateful that Jungto has been very careful about, using masks and sanitation. He suggests that we need to do more than just vaccination. In terms of controlling the spread of virus, we have to look at the use of non-pharmaceutical solutions such as testing, tracking, and isolation. And most importantly, also to provide support to poor wage workers whom we inappropriately call essential workers. So, they have to go out and work, and then they are the one who contracted and who suffer most from the pandemic. Unless we change our way of production, circulation, and consumption of our food, there will be pandemic of one kind or another, or worse, there can be a combination of one or more pandemics, climate disaster, and political instability or war. This point sounds like an alarmist call. However, from Myanmar COVID-19 experience, combined with conflict and violent coup, we know that the possibility is very real. INEB has been working with various partners across the region on organic agriculture and agroecological farming. To address the agribusiness model that produced pandemics, we must take our food sector seriously. Myanmar, with its primitive health sector, survives the pandemic largely because of sharing economy, moral economy, and a culture of sharing. So out of the pandemic, we are also seeing human ingenuity and compassion. In Thailand, in India, across the world, people are helping each other. I'm sure many of you have great stories to share with us, which come out of our collective struggle against a global pandemic and its broader consequences. For the conclusion, which is a 3-page, I would like to discuss confronting difficult questions posed to engage Buddhism. So this is linked to the peace, planet, and pandemic that we just talked about. How would engaged Buddhists address the dilemmas, contradictions, and paradoxes within Buddhism and its different sects? The issue I'm going to raise now are nothing new, yet they are persistently keep confronting us. What can we learn from these common issues? How can engaged Buddhists address them? Which may in turn help us understand the main theme of our conference, Peace, Planet, and Pandemic. The first issue is related to how we understand and apply the Buddhist concept of karma. The second issue is how Buddhists choose between non-violent and violent means, and how do we understand them? I can tell you that these are fundamental questions coming out of confronting with the most violent repression in Myanmar's history while being a practicing and engaged Buddhist. With the current deadly coup in Myanmar and the consequent revolution and resistance, many Buddhist monks as well as Christian priests or Muslim leaders or Hindu leaders are fighting against injustice while risking their own lives. Some Myanmar monks even disrobe and carry weapons to fight against the repression. At the same time, there are senior Theros, including the renowned Sidagu Sayadaw, and their followers are openly supporting the Myanmar military and the violent coup. Because they believe that the Myanmar military is the only one capable of protecting Buddhism. How can Sangha support such unspeakable violence? This irreconcilable moral destitution of towering Buddhist leaders makes millions of Buddhists feel the earth beneath their feet has shattered. Young Buddhists are started questioning relevance of Buddhism and the monastics in their lives. Dismayed by corruption and wealth of some monks, young people are contemplating lay people-led Buddhist order. Sadly for them, Sangam are no longer a saranam to take shelter. Young women are asking, why would we follow a religion that considers us as dirty and treated us with contempt? Compared to men, women are the one regularly and faithfully donating and supporting Buddhism. Compared to men, women are the one regularly supporting the sasana. You know, the saying is, women bodies are dirty, bhikshunis are not welcome, but their donations are welcome. How long can such contradiction maintain in the long run? What good could this discrimination and exclusion of women among the Sangha brings to Theravada? With the ongoing revolution, established ideologies and values are quickly crumbling down. A new Myanmar is quickly emerging. Is Theravada in Myanmar ready to reform or risk extinction? Before and after the violent military coup in Myanmar in 2021, we have seen an unholy alliance between Buddhist nationalists and the Myanmar military. Although majority population in Myanmar are Buddhist, we have long-standing concern about a Muslim takeover, which is being introduced to us as small kids. Although it is unsubstantiated, the concern is widespread. Being a pariah country under the socialist dictatorship for decades that practiced a closed-door foreign policy may have exacerbated religious conservatism, xenophobia, and Islamophobia. Whenever something shameful involving Buddhist clergies happen, we would shrug and blame the bad apples, the individuals. That is, it has nothing to do with Buddhism. But gradually, questions are also being raised if Buddhism as an institution is potentially responsible in helping successive military regimes in Myanmar to claim political legitimacy. Finally, if the concept of karma, or at least in Myanmar, the way Theravada Buddhism, interpreted and taught, is being used to justify a culture of impunity. In Myanmar Theravada tradition, or at least the majority Buddhists understood and practiced, karma is a determinism, preset from the good or bad karma one accumulated in the past lives. This position creates two main problems. One is victim blaming. If a person suffers from an injustice or an affliction, say for example sexual violence or rape, it is because of the bad karma the person committed from the past life. How can this kind of explanation just be justified? The second issue is related to justice and accountability. This way of karmic position sees the will of karma will take care of the wrongdoing of a person, so there is no need to seek justice. Punitive justice is seen as undesirable revenge instead of a deterring action. Instead of seeking punishment, the victim is advised to forgive and move on. There are many cases of mismanaging domestic abuse or sexual violence through traditional arbitration or local justice system dominated by this Buddhist worldview about karma. Many military dictators have enriched themselves with the wealth plundered from the country. However, the soldiers who risk their lives at the front line consider that, oh, the general deserve it because they have good karma from their past life. Why should we be complaining, right? People do go to court or seek alternative justice, but these are the most prevailing attitude of the general public when it's come to seeking justice and accountability. The question now is, in this way, has a teaching of Buddhists unwittingly strengthened culture of impunity in Myanmar, that the military in Myanmar can commit this kind of horrible crimes for over 70 years? In the book Rethinking Karma, the Dharma of Social Justice, by the way, the book is available there. It's a very, very important book. Editor John Watts writes, and I quote, "This lack of engagement with social injustice has created a moral myopia within traditional Buddhist society towards the fundamental form of structural and cultural violence underpinning the more visible act of violence and oppression. The common understanding of karma often serves to perpetuate structural and cultural violence, such as sexism, classism, and political oppression." End of quote. How is our own experience in our own countries? We will discuss in the coming time. How do engaged Buddhists approach justice and accountability? How do we address impunity? Shouldn't karma, which means action, be considered as our own agency to break the structural and cultural violence? Venerables, Ajahns, and Kalyana Mitra, some of you might have visited Myanmar and met my friends and colleagues there. Many of these young Buddhists who are trying their best to foster social change in their community are now joining the revolution. Some of them took non-violent actions, but many are now in the armed resistance. Some become high-ranking revolutionary military officers. They have to fight the battle with guns. It is sad, but I can tell you I'm very proud of them. My respect to them has never changed. Young people are forced to choose this path, not because they enjoy doing violence. In these days, I am re-examining my own position a lot. I thought I would rather die than being recruited to fight a war. Growing up in the front line, I'm no stranger to conflict, and I hate war. But now I'm asking myself, what would I do if violence is knocking on my door? If my loved ones are the victims of a brutal military campaign, will I run away? Will I pray and meditate? Or will I take arms to protect them? Since the time of Buddha, there are apparently wars. How do Buddhists engage in violence? Any killing or harming other beings, not only human beings, is considered as akusala, unwholesome. And yet, in our daily lives, at least for me, we enjoy eating meat. We let the poor people, the butchers, commit the killing. We outsource our bad karma to the low caste or classes. Let the poor people do this bad thing and suffer in their next life, and we get away with that. How does that work? How do Buddhists reconcile such dilemma and contradictions? This is something linked to violence. In his interview with Inside Myanmar podcast, Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi raises the following question related to the gray areas of applied sila and moral dilemma faced by Myanmar in crisis. And I quote, in going against the precept, you are doing so because there's an overriding moral obligation or commitment under that situation to protect the life of people in danger. This doesn't involve reinterpreting the precept such that it loses its moral force. It's understanding there are different moral obligations in play. For example, what does one do if you were to find yourself in a kill or be killed scenario? What types of force are permitted if this might be the only way to stop rape or torture or death of children? And if one decides to use force in such circumstances, what will the karmic consequences be? And can one commit violence without having ill will? End of quote. This comment stirred debates on the social media. It could be controversial, but this is the reality when we apply our sila in our daily life. So I hope that this discussion will be going on in our next session. The revolution in Myanmar has dramatically changed Myanmar society. That's what a revolution should do. It is not all about bad and tragedy only, though. It is tragic, but many stars shine their lights out of this deep darkness too. In times of great suffering, there are also great compassion, great sacrifices we witness. In such time, many contradictions, difficult questions, and taboos in Theravada Buddhism in Myanmar that has been swept under the carpet for too long, that has never been allowed to speak, have come out in the open. Young people are not taking such nonsense anymore. We Buddhists either confront the difficult questions and seek understanding, if not answers, or we risk losing this whole generation. That could well be the end of Buddhism in Myanmar. I know I'm being dramatic, but it almost becomes the self-fulfilling prophecy Myanmar Buddhists are afraid of. We, the older generation, or the young, these answers, if we want to see our lineage and teaching continues. For many times, Ajahn Sulak reminds us that Buddhism should be relevant for the modern world. When it comes to difficult questions, reformation and reinterpretation, Prabuddhadasa Bhikkhu never shies away. He reimagined a new political system bravely and brilliantly. Same can be said with Dr. Ambedkar and the Dalits Buddhist movements. There is so much we can learn from the Ambedkarites. Confronting with the key issue raised by this conference, peace, planet, and pandemic, there is so much needed to be done. We need mass mobilization, mass movement. We need solidarity beyond our narrow scope of nation, state, or ethnicity, or even religion. I lost my words to express how grateful I am for the solidarity, compassion, and generosity shown by INEB members, and Jungto for Myanmar and other members of INEB across the world who are in need. Let me conclude this session with this final quote. In his recent interview with the Buddhist Door, Venerable Punyam Sunim said, "We must still keep doing the right things we are already doing. Without expecting or attachment, or whether our action will finally come to fruition or not." He says, and I quote, "No matter how beautiful the Buddha's teachings are, they are effectively useless unless they can lead people to lift themselves out of their suffering." End of quote. Let us work together to help ourselves, our planet, and other beings. I apologize if some of my comments sounds arrogant or offensive to you. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much for your wonderful speech. It's timely and it applies to all of us, not only to Myanmar. And now we will have a break. We will have a 30-minute break from now on. So it's now 9:54. So 10:25, we will resume. And I invite all the panels for the next session and the keynote speaker, Sam, please have a seat on the stage by 5 minutes before the session starts. And on the back of this hall, we prepared a snack and tea, so please help yourself. And we will give you a 10-minute notification with muktak and 3-minute with a bell. Thank you. 테스트, 테스트, 테스트. 마이크 테스트 유선 2번입니다. 마이크 테스트 무선 1번. 마이크 테스트 무선 2번. 마이크 테스트 무선 3번. 마이크 테스트 유선 3번. 라다크에서 오신 분. 네. Everyone, hello. You just heard the bell sound. That means we have 3 minutes left until we resume. So panels and keynote speaker are invited to have a seat on the stage now. Like that? Oh yeah, I think that's good. Yeah, it is actually on right now. Now, we will have a panel discussion on the topic, Buddhism in a Divided World. Ms. Chandarangsi Sisoban from Rural Development Agency in Laos will be the moderator. And when you use the wireless mics, please grab the middle part here, not this part. Okay, yeah. And please welcome all the panel.
Namaskar, Patera, Nutera, so respect our Pikuni and Pisuk and our participants from all around the world of our INEB network. So thank you for the INEB to have me moderate this very significant session today. Today we have, let's say, 5 panelists, including Sam, who just talking for us. He gave a really relevant speech in this divided world. So we will have 4 more panelists for today who are going to give us their direct experience from their communities in related to the theme of our conference today. Today we are talking about the Buddhism in a divided world, peace, planet, and pandemic. So we all have the direct experience in peace, planet, and pandemic suffering. So we have Ajahn Sulak mentioned this morning from his hope. I wish this panel can give him a little bit of hope for more hope from him. He was hoping that how to overcome the divided world. From these 2 days, I can say we may not give the whole answer or for the whole hope that he wished, but we will speak and we will give our comment from our perspective and our experience. I would like to start from Winmoto. Yes, he's from Indonesia, and he said, "Why I'm the first?" I say, "You are the first." There's no reason. Yes, but yeah, please, you have the floor, and we will try to speak in not more than 10 minutes. Right. Yes, thank you, Winmoto.
Ajahn Sulak, Venerable Mungyeong Sunim, dear Kalyana Mitra, brothers and sisters. Thank you for having me today. I'm going to share my experience regarding the topic of Buddhism in a divided world. For me, as long as there are differences in this world, division, I believe will always be there. It is just a natural part of ourselves. But we can make a conscious decision towards unity. Today, I'm going to share with you the experience of Indonesia Buddhist minority Buddhist community. How did we drive towards this situation in Indonesia before today? We used to have a highly divisive society at the time, moving towards more open and inclusive community society that we have, that we enjoy now. Let me begin by telling you a short story, super brief story about Indonesia. We have all the ingredients, all the reason to be divided, to be divisive. We live in a multiracial, multi-religious, different ethnic groups in one country. So we have all the reason to be divided. And it was in the beginning of the formation of the country, suspicious was prevalent, especially for Buddhist community in Indonesia. The government at that time had this formula. If you're a Buddhist, Buddhist equals to Chinese, and Chinese equals to communist. And at that time, the government was a staunch anti-communist. It was their position at the time. So they have to prevent communism to spread in Indonesia. You know, it was the context of Cold War at the time. And you know, with that formula, Buddhist community in Indonesia was heavily discriminated, well, including my family and myself. I'm from the Chinese, I'm part of Chinese Indonesian, and we were forced to cut off the relations to China. So we were forced to change our name. We were not allowed to speak Chinese Mandarin again, and many other things. So not only Chinese community, but other minority religious groups. So we have Christians, Catholics, and Hindu. But I'm going to tell you the experience about Buddhist communities now. However, with that I mean, with that situation, what should we do? You know, the Buddhist community being isolated at the time. We were isolated and we were not allowed to participate in public service. So no participation in public service because it was very difficult to be a part of a government officer, for example. Yeah, it was a very difficult situation we faced at the time. But as my student organization at the time, we believed that we should narrow this gap of understanding. We should tell the larger the community, the larger Indonesian community, that we also be an equal part of this society, because they have this ignorance about Buddhism. You know, Buddhism were only seen as like a statue worshiper and no other than that. We didn't offer any value and any solution to this country. So we try to bridge the gap by keep communicating with those in powers and also those community leaders that we also have something to offer. We have our idea. And we didn't get much support at that time. And one of the biggest support that we get at that time was from Ajahn Sulak. So big round of applause for Ajahn Sulak. So Ajahn Sulak invited us, you know, my senior members of the community to participate at INEB conference, and we got a lot of new ideas at the time. We saw what another countries did, and then we tried to implement it in Indonesia. Fast forward, in the year of '97, we all know there were Asia financial crisis at the time. Korea, Thailand, Indonesia were badly hit, and the authoritarian regime at that time was on the brink of collapse. So we began to gather community leaders, religious leaders, student leaders came together, and we offer our ideas. How should we? What are our visions to new Indonesia? So we, Buddhist community at that time, represented by our organization, managed to invite the late great master, Venerable Mahagosananda, and it was a breath of fresh air. So Indonesian society knew that Buddhist communities, Buddhist values has something to offer to this new to new Indonesia that we envision together. So the political and social change ensued after the financial crisis, and we adopted new values, the values of a more democratic Indonesia and the more open and inclusive one. And now we are treated with we are treated equally. So there are still discrimination, but we've made a lot of progress. So by communication, and this thing we don't take for granted. It is by work hard and you know, communication and all right. So yeah, and it involves the work of many different actors. So here we are now. We can contribute to the society. We are treated as equal, and we are not alone. Even JTS also came to Indonesia to support us, to support disaster relief. So we prove to our society that we can also contribute to this, to Indonesia, towards a better Indonesia. So in conclusion, we work toward unity despite of like division. So what are the values of Buddhism that we can offer towards this divided, at least I say divided Indonesia? It's just as simple as just what Ajahn Sulak said and Mungyeong Sunim has have mentioned. It's loving kindness instead of hatred and desperation. And no matter how imperfect it is, we've made a lot of progress and we work towards it. And we know that we are not alone because another factor is we have Kalyana Mitra, the support from Ajahn Sulak, support from JTS also help us also to grow and contribute more to the society in Indonesia. So that's all I can say for today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Vinmoto. We have the online as well. So for the people who are watching, maybe you don't know Vinmoto. Vinmoto is from Indonesia and he works for the Buddhist Tushi, right? Tushi Foundation Indonesia, and he also a member of INEB Executive Committee for us today. So thank you so much for your comments and speech. It was suffering when you talk about the isolation in the public, so we can feel that. And of course, again, with the INEB, with the Ajahn Sulak, and with our Kalyana Mitra here, is to support your communities. So, and next, I would like to come to Jill. So, Jill, let's say, from your experience, not only from Australia, right? I'm sure that you have experience all around the world in terms of the peace and many movements that you come across. And Jill, can you explain or introduce yourself a little bit for our watcher from online? Thank you. I give you a floor. You can use that microphone.
Thank you, Chantan Langsi. And Ajahn Sulak, Venerable Mungyeong Sunim, and dear friends and Kalyana Mitras. It is a great honor to be up here, but I feel it should be someone who's more directly involved. Most of my experience has been in the form of offering training in peace building and conflict transformation over many years, particularly in Myanmar and in India. And I have learnt so much from the friends that I have been working with and from all of you through our INEB network. So I will share some of what I have learnt in this process, and also some of the guides along the way, some guides in our INEB network, like Joanna Macy and also Dr. Ambedkar approach, a Buddhist approach, and working as a social, both of them working as socially engaged Buddhists. So, the question is that's been presented to us: how can we, as Buddhists, respond to this increasing divisiveness in the world, taking its many forms in terms of climate disasters, homelessness, record flows of refugees, etc. And this can be overwhelming. In the face of things falling apart due to these extreme disruptions to peace, pandemic, and planet. So we're now facing what my teacher in Japan, Harada Roshi, calls global trauma. But we have our 10-year INEB global roadmap and Buddhist teachings and our practice. And we have to work towards life-sustaining alternatives to the current unjust, unequal and violent models of society. So many of you here are already doing this work, and I'm hoping that we'll have the opportunity to share much more, to learn from each other. Just as in the Jungto Society, can see the power of coming together and that power, of volunteering, of learning from each other and being able to work towards change and supporting communities. So first, just like to mention briefly, Joanna Macy, over 5 decades has been teaching, became well known for her despair and empowerment work, the importance of taking action as a means of overcoming despair. In her work that reconnects, and what she calls the great unravelling of the old growth systems. Just like Sai Sam mentioned about with the revolution in Myanmar, when things fall apart, the possibility for new things to emerge. So with the unravelling, and what she also said when asked why does she continue to do this work, she said, when things fall apart, so we don't turn on each other, which we can see that happening now. But her approach is also, a direct response to healing these divides, how we come together and work together and to face our fears and to find ways forward. So in the face of this overwhelm and frozen fear, Joanna Macy reminds us that it's good to remember, what do I love about being alive together? From this expression of gratitude, it's then possible to move on to be able to touch one's, the other side, to share one's pain and despair. As this can be transformative, releasing this energy as caring and for action. In our peace-building training, we focus on developing trust, working with and across difference, for building resilience and transformation. How we work with conflict can lead to an atmosphere of peace, taking a wider perspective to cut through the entrenched attitudes, to be able to step back with an attitude of not knowing, helps to loosen our stuckness for both sides to potentially be able to explore possibility in a way forward, or to be with what is. Such as a friend in one past training in Myanmar who'd been a former political prisoner for 20 years, and in that time of experiencing his own suffering and suffering of others, he found a way to touch life by giving a couple of grains of rice a day to ants to see life. While there, he also composed songs around freedom from fear, and he's gone on working with communities in Myanmar to help cross these divides. And after all that he had been through, no anger, no angst, but really living loving kindness, as I find with so many people in Myanmar. I mention Myanmar because that's where most of us spent my time. But important to look into the root causes for the cultural and structural forms of violence, their dynamics that divide us, which manifest as barriers in our communication and relationships. And Sai Sam has given us very eloquently and deep analysis of a lot of those deeper systemic causes that manifest in the violence. So Alan Sanake and I, in doing this training in India, in Nagaloka with Buddhist starlets, we've witnessed the power of group sharing of social issues, or dukkha, in the form of caste discrimination and gender oppression, etc. And as a group process, looking into the many root causes helps people to see more clearly that it is not their fault or ego, but the systems embodying power and dominance. And I think that's been the issue. I mean, the long history, the legacy of colonialism that goes back so long about divide and conquer that keeps people in their individual selves feeling that they're responsible rather than the systems that are causing the problems. So addressing the divides that tear communities apart helps us stand together rather than against each other. I really like Alan's definition of one definition of socially engaged Buddhism that points to socially engaged Buddhism as a willingness to see how deeply people suffer, to see how we have fashioned whole systems of suffering out of gender, race, caste, ability, age, etc. And to know that interdependently and individually we co-create this suffering. Thus we have a responsibility for all. So what gets in the way of communication? What are the barriers? I mean, even at the micro level, which is where we start, like Mahagosananda used to say, if there's peace in the heart, there's peace in the individual, peace in the family. We start, but to see the need to reach out, to hear the voices that are often silenced, of the marginalised, to touch our common humanity. One way of crossing these divides, friends in Myanmar several years ago, before the attempted coup, started a movement for humanity with dignity, because religion and ethnicity were too inflammatory, that caused the barriers that it was hard to get beyond. And we do something like that in the peace building training to suggest that people, before we can have a communication, to look at what are the factors that might divide us. And people come up with the various things like gender, age, race, and religion. And we have people standing in between the people going to have a conversation, and they see visibly all these barriers. So by bringing them to the surface and being aware, it helps us to be able to reach out. I was going to mention something from another friend from Myanmar, poetry, about how the construction of walls inside and out. Just very briefly, but he did this poetry slam in 2019 on the day it was televised, was on the day Aung San Suu Kyi was presenting in The Hague on the genocide case against the Rohingya. And this poetry slam from Rohingya, Burma, from different ethnicities, to be able to raise awareness in very sensitive ways to help people see the barriers that are there, the walls that we build up, and the importance of building bridges. So in deep listening to each other, seeing our commonalities, there is potential for healing, for addressing the polarisation that divides and strengthening community. I haven't unfortunately got time to go into...
I give you more, 1 minute.
Oh, well, yes, Baba Saheb from Ambedkar, who converted millions of Dalits to Buddhism in 1956. His principles of liberty, equality and fraternity that Ajahn Sulak also mentioned this morning are such important principles for all engaged Buddhists, for all of us today, and particularly just taking up fraternity. And one directly experienced the practice of that fraternity in Nagaloka, where the warmth of friendship between people within each other and reaching out to others. But fraternity that's connected, it's akin to our focus on Kalyana Mitra in INEB, and Jungto also the focus on togetherness and on Sangha, our spiritual community. Aiken Roshi, my first teacher, who came to the INEB meeting in 1995, was talking about the importance of Sanghas, saying that when things fall apart, which they will, It's going to be up to our sanghas and our communities, our sanghas, our lay communities or our communities, to care for each other. And from there, to be able to care for other communities who aren't able to coping at that stage. So it's where we support each other, as happens in times of deep suffering, such as the teachers at Saya Foundation in Mandalay. And I'm sorry that the director couldn't come here today to this meeting. But in recent workshops with these teachers, I was so inspired by their support for each other, their students and other teachers, and in their commitment to the future of Myanmar in teaching children. And they give this support while doing this on Zoom because they can't go out because of fear of their security. And they're further reaching out into other circles by doing interfaith work. And I see this process, it's like throwing a rock into a pond that causes ripples at the work that we do, reaching out across difference. And it's about, this process is starting at the grassroots, building the movement. So Sam mentioned about building the movement, and that's what this peace building training has been doing. When you can't change the top, you work to strengthen those at the bottom and to build out across difference to bring about change. So peace occurs where people's needs are met. So we need to listen to those needs, bearing witness to the suffering and to those who are different, finding ways to reach out. Seeing the light inside the dark, like the yin and yang in the Taoist symbol, like the symbol in the conference details of that coming together. The light is always there, even if we don't see it, but through our Buddhist practice to see that. So just find it in gratitude for this opportunity to be together, to share and to learn from each other, and to explore ways to build bridges across the divides towards more life-sustaining alternatives. Thank you.
"25 years experience in Myanmar alone. 10 minutes cannot capture all yours." Yes, I'm sure for that. And you mentioned in a really, really significant of the process to build peace. The training that you did come across in Myanmar is really so respect for that from
the ocean.
Yes. I like the song. Maybe you can share with us later. Freedom from Fears from Myanmar. Thank you so much, Jill. So we will come next to our Venerable Dhamma Nanda from Sri Lanka. Venerable, can you introduce yourself a little bit for our online participant, watcher, and of course you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Achan Sulak, Venerable Punyom Sunom, and INEB Kalyana Mitras, and home from Myanmar who helped me to come to this conference. Thank you all. And thank you for the keynote speaker for bringing this, the whole discussion focused. And I like to share with you my own experience from Sri Lanka. I'm sorry, I'm Galkande Dhammananda from Sri Lanka and Buddhist monk, and I'm in charge of Walpola Rahula Institute. We all are working for the healing and reconciliation and bringing Buddhism into practice to find solutions to the problems we are facing. I like to share with you my own experience, which will be helpful for us to continue the dialogue. first experience is 1987 to 1990. Sri Lanka faced violent past, and then 30 years of conflict, and then the Buddhist Islam kind of tension that started about 10 years back, and then the economic crisis that we are facing today. These are the things. And what I see, 1987 to 1990, it was young people in the country. They were fighting against the government to overthrow the government, saying that government is corrupted. And during that time, then I was about 18 years, and I saw lots of violence. And then one of my fellow monks who was 8 months elder to me became one of the disappeared person. So I lost my fellow monk. And then these 30 years of war, during that time, my eldest brother was a police officer, and I lost him in the war. So that is the second. And what I understood, so first thing, to understand that I am a wounded person. I am with wounds. That is first thing and then the conflicts I am talking about, they are not created by me, or I am not part of that, because I was young when I faced such situations. In this context, being a Buddhist monk, how to respond, there, first thing was to identify and accept I am wounded, and I need to be healed unless I will wound others. That is the first step, my journey, healing. And there, with the wounds of losing my friend and particularly losing my elder brother, I was continuing, I am doing religious things, still I have the wound. One particular day, I was sitting under a tree around 9 p.m. and without any light, and I was just sitting under the tree. And that day, first time, I in a way, it came like whoever who happened to take a gun against my brother, may he or she be well, may he or she be happy. And if that person is no more, may that person also find the ultimate peace, like the way my brother attained that. When this thought came, I felt like, really, kind of something heavy stuff in me was removed. That is my own experience. And that is, I always say, this is the starting of the healing journey. And then the second time was that when I was in Batticalo in a program, first time I met those people, until then, introduced them as, as terrorists or those who have taken gun against. And I never named them terrorists, but that is how it came. And there I met them, former combatant. There were 5 people. Out of 5, 2 were women, female, and one person, one female widow. When she narrated her story, I couldn't bear it, and I felt my brother is privileged person than this person. And, that I name as the second step of my healing journey. What I like to share, that this is needed, healing myself, unless one way or the other we will wound others. That is what I like to share with everyone. And then when the gun start speaking, it is very difficult to intervene. So if a kind of violent development is happening, it is very much needed to stop it going into that level. When the gun starts speaking, it is very difficult. So when this Buddhist Islam, that extreme, Buddhist organization, extreme Buddhist organization started violence, that hate speeches against Islam and, promoting hate. We, as Walpole Rahula Institute, people here, Suchit and Home, we all work very hard to, prevent that and, counter that arguments to stop it going into that level. And then when this economic crisis started, young people, not only young people, many people came into one place called Goldface, and they occupied there for 100 days. And there also, our intervention was to stop it going into violence. And we share through YouTube and other ways, whatever the platform we get, to, from our own experience, we have stories to tell. So use those stories to tell the people who are in the fight, don't let violence thing happen. You tell your story, but always refrain from violence. And there we used the teaching of the Buddha. One particular teaching called in Theravada Buddhism, that is called Kakachupama Sutta, the simile of double-handled sword. That teaching there, Buddha suggests, even before the death, don't go for violence. That is there in that teaching. We quote such teachings and shared, and how to protest not without going into violence. So these are what I like to share with you, and this sharing is not just non-violence is good, and so that it is not. We based on the kind of philosophical base that comes in Buddhism, and many of you shared here, that is the dependent origination, the theory of conditional genesis, that we are interconnected and interdependent. So based on that, if there is nothing called myself, I am is the others created myself. My parents, the education, the books I read, and everything created me. So myself mean the others. So, and I am not someone passive. I am engaging in creating others. So we are very much interconnected and interdependent. So in that is the case, we cannot hate this world. We cannot wound this world, because we are interconnected. Based on that, we promoted this idea of refrain from violence and be non-violence. So this experience I like to share. I think this will be the kind of introduction, and in the coming discussion, I like to share more. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Venerable. So, when the gun starts speaking, it is really difficult to intervene. So, the gun is starting. It started everywhere around the world. So, we will talk more on that in the second part. So, I want to go to Honorable Dobob. Did I correct your name correctly? Yeah, Dobob. Yeah, he is the former chairman of the Hingje, the committee of the I can't pronounce this. Yeah, in the Korean Buddhism. So you have the floor, and he will speak in Korea, and we will have the interpreter. So bear with me, please. Give you the.
네, 안녕하세요. 반갑습니다.
Hello, good to see you all.
국제 참여 불교에 관심을 갖고 이렇게 참 열과 성을 다해서 활동하고 역할하는 이런 많은 도반들을 만나게 되어서 대단히 기쁩니다.
I am very pleased to meet all of you, my fellow Buddhists, who are working your hearts out for the INEB and its mission.
그 많은 수고를 하고 계시는데 그분에 대해서도 깊이 존경과 감사의 마음을 전하고 싶습니다.
As well as I pay my utmost respect and gratitude to all the huge efforts that you're putting into your world.
저는 지리산이라고 하는 큰 산자락에 있는 시골절에서 시골절 실상사라고 하는 절에서 살고 있습니다.
I currently live in a temple called Shilsangsa, underneath a mountain, huge mountain called Jisan.
주로 시골에서 활동하고 있기 때문에 그런 뭐 국제적인 감각이나 또는 경험 이런 것들은 갖고 있지 않습니다.
Since I usually work in the countryside of Korea, in the rural Korea, so I don't bring the same sensibility or experience of international forum as you do.
다만 제가 불교 수행자로서 시골에 살고는 있지만 그럼에도 불구하고 사람들이 사는 곳에서는 늘 시시비비가 부글부글 끓습니다.
But as a spiritual practitioner of Buddhism, although I live in a rural countryside, I realize that wherever people are, there are conflicts.
그로 인한 갈등과 대립 또 말할 수 없는 그런 분노와 증오, 상처들이 늘 생기는 게 우리 삶의 현장입니다.
And it is the reality of our everyday life that those conflicts lead to tension and hatred, that leads to further violence.
그렇기 때문에 비록 작은 현장에서 벌어지는 일이긴 하지만 이런 문제들을 어떻게 풀어야 할지 또 어떻게 다뤄야 할지 또 더불어 함께 살 수 있도록 하기 위해서는 또 어떻게 우리가 길을 찾고 만들어가야 될지 이런 부분에 대한 문제의식으로 늘 고민하게 됩니다.
And although I'm here in my little countryside, those problems always beckons me. How do we live together in harmony and togetherness? Overcome our differences, overcome this tension and conflicts that it kind of inflicts all of us in our everyday lives.
당연히 이럴 때 부처님은 어떻게 했을까? 또 부처님이 머물고 있었던 사찰은 또한 무엇을 또는 어떤 역할을 해야 될까? 이런 생각을 하게 되죠.
And also that leads me naturally to think and question what would Buddha do, and what would a temple that worships the Buddha, what role would we play?
저는 이제 부처님 말씀 한 가지 그리고 부처님 일생에서 나타났던 하나의 어떤 사건에 대한 이야기를 잠깐 할까 합니다.
So I'd like to take this opportunity to discuss a word, a saying by the Buddha, as well as kind of illustrated incident that happened during Buddha's lifetime.
부처님 말씀이 하나는 나의 가르침, 나의 진리는 함께 대화를 나눌 경우 말 못 알아듣는 사람은 빼고 말을 알아들을 수 있는 사람이라면 누구나 바로 이해할 수 있다. 바로 실현된다. 바로 경험되고 증명된다고 하셨습니다.
So Buddha said, my truth, my teaching, unless you do not understand language at all, my teaching is such that you can immediately experience it and you can immediately prove the truth of it.
잘 아시리라고 생각이 되는데 바로 이해되고 바로 실현이 되고 바로 경험이 되고 바로 증명이 될 수 있다면 그것은 누구나 함께 할 수 있는 길이라고 해도 틀림이 없죠.
So if a truth can be understood by all, can be actualized by all, and can be experienced by all, and can be proven to all, it is something that we can all share together.
매우 단순하기도 하고 명료하기도 하고
It is very simple, very clear,
또 현실적으로 효과적이기도 하고 그렇죠.
and very realistically applicable.
그런데 실제 불교 공부도 하고 수행도 하고 활동도 하고 역할을 해보면 부처님 말씀과는 정반대 상황에 놓이는 경우들이 대부분입니다.
However, most of the times when we seek to apply our Buddhist teachings and learnings in real life, during study, during application, trying to actualize in society, we often end up in situations in which it's the opposite of what Buddha has taught.
그렇지만 항상 어떻게 내가 바로 이해될 수 있도록, 실현될 수 있도록, 경험될 수 있도록, 증명될 수 있도록 할까 하는 데 맞추어서 내 삶을 만들어가는 게 제 일상입니다.
However, it is in our everyday practice to shape our lives so that we may understand, we may actualize, and we may experience and prove Buddha's teachings.
또 한 가지 이 부처님 생애에서 하나의 사건은 여러분들이 잘 알고 있듯이 전쟁 한복판에 가서 앉아 있는 부처님의 모습입니다.
The incident I want to illustrate in Buddha's own teaching, which is familiar to every one of you, is the Buddha sitting in the midst of a battle.
부처님의 일생은 온통 여러분들이 추구하고 있는 참여불교로 일생이 채워져 있다도 과언이 아니라고 저는 생각합니다.
So I don't think it's an overstatement to say Buddha's life was all about engaged Buddhism.
이런 부분에서 제가 살고 있는 시골에서 있었던 경험 하나를 말씀드릴까 합니다.
And from that perspective, I want to share an experience that happened to me in my own little rural part of the world.
아까 기조발제 말씀도 잘 들었고 또 앞에 패널들 말씀도 들었는데
based on what my fellow panelists have just spoken and also the keynotes you presented this morning.
제가 평소 갖고 있었던 이제 문제식들이 거의 같은 내용으로 와 닿았습니다.
Basically, I felt touched because we share the same problem statement that always plagues us in our everyday life.
여러분들이 크고 작은 현장에서 답을 찾아가기 위한 노력도 제 경험하고 크게 다르지 않습니다.
And the struggle that each one of you engage to find the right answers in the situation that you are in, whether that's large situation or small situation, that's not too indifferent. That's not too different from the situation I'm in.
제가 살고 있는 시골 마을에서 어떤 문제로 해서 어느 종교 기관과 마을 주민들 사이에 극단적인 싸움이 벌어졌습니다.
So in this country village I live in, there was a fight, an extreme fight that happened, a conflict that occurred between a religious institution and the villagers.
그리고 그 주민들은 편이 갈려서 또한 종교기관과 주민들의 싸움, 또 종교기관을 편드는 사람과 마을 주민을 편드는 사람들의 편 갈라서 또한 극단적인 싸움으로 전개됐습니다.
So not only was the fight between the religious institution and the villagers themselves were divided into pro institution and anti.
저는 그때 부처님의 일생을 잘 살펴보면 평소 어느 편을 들어서 문제를 다루지 않았다는 게 파악이 됩니다.
However, when we examine Buddha's life well, whenever he tried to solve a conflict, he never actually took sides.
그래서 그 부분을 우리 현장에 적용시켜 보자 이렇게 판단을 하고 저도 그 마을 문제를 다루기 시작했습니다.
So I judged, you know what? Let's try to apply that in our problem, and I tried to kind of insert myself and try to do that.
우리 속담에는 싸움은 말리고 흥정은 붙여야 된다는 얘기가 있습니다.
So there's an adage in Korea and it says, you know what? Stop the fighting, but encourage negotiations or haggling.
아마 현장에서 부처님이 하신 일도 그런 일이지 않을까 싶네요.
In that sense, haggling for peace was something that Buddha did.
저도 제가 살고 있는 현장에서 그렇게 접근을 해봤습니다.
So that's the approach I took to my problem.
그래서 제가 지역 주민들에게 제안을 한 것은 우리 문제를 잘 풀고 만들어가기 위해서는 뜻 있는 사람들이 함께 만나고 대화하고 대화를 통해서 길을 찾고 답을 만들어가는 게 최선의 길이지 않겠나 그걸 해보자 이렇게 제안을 했습니다.
So I suggest to the villagers, to the people involved in this issue, that for those people who actually has intent to resolve, the best way is to engage in a dialogue, conversation, and to find a way through, and to find a solution that's mutually acceptable.
그래서 민원을 지역 사회에서 벌어진 민원을 다룰 수 있는 위원회를 구성을 했습니다.
So we created a committee that can actually receive issues that arises from the local villages to be a forum for discussion.
그래서 위원회를 구성을 해서 이쪽도 참여하고 저쪽도 참여하고 종교기관도 참여하고 또 일반 주민들도 참여하고 그렇게 해서 이 문제를 일단 대화로 풀자. 극단적인 싸움으로 가다 보니까 농부들은 농사를 지을 수가 없고 기관은 기관대로 일을 할 수가 없는 상황을 휘말리게 되니까 일단 대화로 풀자.
Because the villagers were so engaged in extreme fighting amongst each other, it was impossible to solve the situation as is. So what we decided through this committee, with the participation of the institution, with the villagers and the different sides of the villagers, and decided that we shall use dialogue to solve this issue.
두 번째는 함께 사는 길을 찾자.
And the second principle that guided us was that let's find a solution that includes all of us.
세 번째는 분열된 공동체를 회복해서 이 공동체 미래가 희망적으로 잘 갈 수 있도록 함께 노력하자.
And the third principle was that let's try to put together our fragmented community and so that we can move forward as one.
그런 방향과 원칙에 합의를 하고 많은 작업들이 있었지만 한 3년 걸려서 그 문제가 잘 정리되어서 마을이 다시 정상적인 상태로 돌아갔던 그런 경험이 있습니다.
So those were the three underlying foundational principles that actually guided our journey. Although it took 3 years, eventually the villagers kind of reestablished the norm.
다만 우리는 지금 분열된 세상에서 불교가 뭘 어떻게 해야 될 것인가 이야기를 나누고 있는데.
But the topic at hand is what do Buddhists do in a divided world?
내용을 잘 들여다보면 세상은 분열된 적이 한 번도 없습니다.
But if you really look at the situation, the world has never been divided.
부처님은 이 사실을 너무나 투철하게 잘 알고 계십니다.
And this was a visceral truth that the Buddha has known.
그런데 사람들은 이 사실을 모르기 때문에 계속 분리와 분열을 만들어내고 있습니다.
But because people do not realize this truth, we create and repeatedly create the division and the conflicts and the tension.
국가란 이름으로, 종교란 이름으로, 또는 어떤 이념이란 이름으로, 또는 지역이란 이름으로, 또는 이해타산의 이름으로 온갖 명분을 갖고 분리와 분열로 갈 수밖에 없는 상황들을 우리 스스로가 조작해내고 있는 것이죠.
So we construct this division, different layers of division, whether we call it nationalities or countries or borders or religion or ideologies or different understandings. We construct these divisions.
이 상황을 어떻게 할 것인가?
What to do?
불교는 깨달음의 종교라고 얘기를 합니다.
They say Buddhism is a religion of enlightenment.
본래 분리되어 있지 않다는 사실을 사실대로 직시하고 인식하고 그 확신의 토대 위에서 문제를 다뤘을 때 바람직한 길이 나올 수 있다고 봅니다.
So I believe that when we actually recognize the truth that we have never been divided and based all our problem solving on that a singular truth, that's when we can get to an acceptable solution.
불교인들은 또는 종교인들은 또는 뜻있는 시민사회 사람들은 또는 사찰 또는 종교기관이 해야 될 일은 바로 싸움을 말리고 흥정을 붙이는 역할을 하는 것이 불교 또는 종교가 해야 될 가장 바람직한 길이 아니겠는가라고 생각합니다.
So I believe that as Buddhists, as religious clergy, as people in the temple, as activists, we should all engage in stopping the fight, the conflict, but encouraging haggling for peace.
오늘 이 자리가 그 길을 활짝 열어가는 출발선이 되었으면 좋겠습니다. 고맙습니다.
And it's my sincere wish that this place today becomes the starting point for that effort. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Venerable Dobob. So I quite agree with him on what we have done is opposite from what the Buddha taught us. Yeah. So from his peace, to build peace is not to attract with the problem, but to start the negotiation or the dialogues. This is a really, really significant conversation for us today. So thank you for the 4 panelists, and but we are not in yet. So I know you have many comments and questions, but please, it may not a question for our only 4 panelists. We have Sam from our keynote speaker here as well. Sam was mentioned and justify all the peace, planet, and pandemic in the reality, what happening in Myanmar, that really, really relevant example for us to really obvious that we can see and we can imagine that's only Myanmar case. How about all around the world? The conflict is happening even from the rural countryside of in Korea. From our panelists from Korea, give us the example for just right now. So I will give the floor for the comment and question from our participant here, so that we have more time to discuss. So please. Okay, we have one hand over there, and you're the second. Can you introduce yourself first? Yes.
Good morning to everybody. I am Kishore Thukral from India. My question is going to be directed to Sai Samkham and the 2 venerables on the stage. Sam, in your keynote speech, you did mention that the time has come to think about how to counter continuing violence. And you cited what is going on in Myanmar for a long time. I'm assuming that when you speak about the option of taking to arms, to counter arms, the option that the 2 venerables have spoken about negotiating for peace, has been, you have gone through that option already. And venerables, for you, my question is, how long will you keep negotiating for peace? When you have on one side a party that believes only in violence or suppression through violent means, while as Buddhists we respect the need for peace, how long would the process of peace negotiation continue? That is my question.
Thank you so much. So maybe we can have the second, and then we can answer as one. We have the question for Sam and for Dobob. So, and yeah, please.
Hi, my name is Hua from Thailand. I'm the member of Peace for Sangha for Peace, which is one of the projects of INEB in Bangkok. I am a transgender woman, and my pronouns is she, hers. I feel a little bit, I feel like I am in different worlds, because at work, at home, and wherever I go, I always attended LGBT circle and conferences. And in my work, we all talk about LGBT, right? So our experience as the lesbian, gay, trans, bisexual, non-binary, queer, intersex. But here in this space, I haven't heard about LGBT. And I think it's very important if we don't want to build a divided world. How we're going to make this space more inclusive for people who are different. And also, I being recognized that a lot of people mention gender and a lot of time gender have been interpreted as male and female. And in my work, when we talk about gender, gender is more than two boxes, more male and female. How we going to make this space being inclusive and welcome for the LGBT folk who are already in this space, and maybe many more to come in the short future. And that is my question for everyone on the panel.
I would address this question from our Thai person. It's not only for the panel. I would challenge all of us who has the answer or who has the comment to give as well. So, who would like to go first? Sam, would you respond to the question or? Okay, then we have one question for the Venerable Dobov on how long will the negotiation on the violence process. This is a really tough question for sure for all of us. But please give your comment.
네, 참 어렵습니다.
It's a difficult question.
그렇지만 우리가 이제 부처님 가르침으로 삶을 잘 관찰을 해보면
But if we were to look at this problem from Buddha's life perspective,
인간은 행위하는 대로 그 삶이 창조되어진다라고 합니다.
he says we create life according to how we act.
따라서 우리가 폭력적으로 문제를 다루면 폭력적인 과정과 결과가 될 수밖에 없습니다.
So if we treat a problem in a violent way, then the result and the process itself is inevitably going to be violent.
결과는 평화를 바라고 있는데
So we look at peace as the outcome.
우리의 기대와는 다르게 정반대의 결과가 되고 만다는 게 실제 경험할 수 있는 내용들입니다.
But although we ask for peace as the outcome, the end state becomes violent. And this is something we have experienced.
부처님도 실패하셨습니다. 전쟁 한복판에 들어가서 전쟁의 문제를 평화적으로 해결하고자 했었죠.
So even Buddha failed because he went into the middle of the battle and tried to resolve the battle peacefully.
그런데 실패했습니다.
But he failed.
그럼에도 불구하고 일생 그 길을 가셨습니다.
Despite that failure, he kept on his road.
왜 그랬을까요?
For the rest of his life. Why
그
did
길
he choose that?
말고는 다른 길이 없었기 때문에.
Because there was no other path.
이런 정신을 국가와 민족의 문제로 적용했던 게 마하트마 간디의 인도 독립운동이었죠.
So Gandhi's independence movement in India was a movement that applied this.
물론 만남과 대화, 소통, 합의를 통해서 평화적으로 해결이 되도록 하려면 어마어마한 노력이 필요합니다.
However, to arrive at a peaceful solution in a non-violent ways through
어마어마한
engagement,
실력도 필요합니다.
through dialogues, it takes enormous amount of effort, enormous amount of skill.
그렇지만 우리가 그 길을 가야 하는 이유는 우리가 희망하는 평화는 그런 관점과 그런 방식과 그런 과정을 통해서만 가능하기 때문입니다.
But the reason that we have to keep on this road of nonviolence is that the peace that we want can only come out through this path.
지금 그 질문에 뭐 답으로 말씀을 드린다면 우리가 할 수 있는 이런 노력을 최선을 다해서 했음에도 불구하고 안 되어서 전쟁 때문에 불의한 사람들이 너무 큰 희생을 당한다면 아마 그런 상황에서는 무기를 두르는 것도 불가피하지 않겠나 이런 생각이 듭니다.
However, in response to direct response to your question, if we did everything we could, utmost effort into trying to follow this peaceful, non-violent ways, but having said that, that creates an unacceptable and fearsome sacrifice among the innocents because we are following that path. Maybe that is something that we can discuss, and maybe there is a moment for us to also raise arms to protect the innocents.
사실은 이 싸움의 문제를 평화적으로 해결하도록 하는 역할을 해야 될 주체는 당연히 국가가 있다면 정부가 그걸 해야죠.
So it should be the government's role to actually try to find a peaceful solution to a conflict.
종교가 있다면 종교가 그 일을 해야 마땅하죠.
It should be a religion's role to find a peaceful solution to a conflict.
뜻 있는 시민사회가 있다면 뜻 있는 시민사회가 그 역할을 해야 되죠.
And if there is civil society, it should be the civil society's role to find a peaceful means to a conflict.
근데 현실은 정반대로 나타나고 있는 게 안타깝지만 현실입니다.
However, although this is unfortunate, the reality is that these societies, these institutions are not fulfilling those roles.
제가 답할 수 있는 것은 이 정도일 것 같습니다.
I think that's the kind of current limit of how I can answer your questions today.
You get the answer? I think we all get the answer. Because there's no exact number that we can answer how long. So it's depend on, like for him say, our role as society, as a religious, as a Buddhist, as all of us, so to answer. I will come to Sam to respond. I'm not sure what you get the question from him, right? Can you repeat that, and then we can have the same.
Thank you very much, Kishoji, for raising this question. You know, the nature of countering violence with violence means where it is going to end, you know, or when it is going to end. I think, especially in Myanmar, there are the non-violence resistant part and the violence arm resistant part, and they are complementing each other. A lot of us does not believe that we will be able to defeat this authoritarian, violent regime with arm resistance alone. That is being used as what we call defensive war. So the main purpose of taking up arms is to protect the innocent people. And the information I gave you this morning about, you know, area bombing, 60 people immediately killed, and you know now over 100 people are already died in that. But even before that, a primary school was being shelled also. So 17 people killed, including I think like 9 children getting involved in central Myanmar. And then a few weeks ago, also a teacher who refused to work for the military regime was killed, and his head was cut and hanged at the school. So this is kind of like the extent, sorry about these very violent information, but this is the extent that the military is going into. They are actually acting like a foreign occupying force, you know. That's the reason why we are calling the military as a fascist military. Their tactics are just like the Nazis or the fascists during the World War II. But I think for the civilian side, as I explained to you, many of those who joined the armed resistance movement are former peace builders also. So it's a very difficult position for them, but it's kind of like a consensus among us is not to glorify militarism. So of course, you know, when you fight, sometimes you got very excited and you are feeling proud and all that. And in the social media, young people will post themselves with nice uniform and guns and everything there. But we are reminding each other that, you know, we choose it because it is a necessity, but let's not glorify violence. Let's not glorify militarism. This is the beginning of that. And when these resistant forces captured the junta soldier alive, they are not being harmed. They are treating well, They are not being tied up or anything like that. They are allowed to contact their families and things like that. So the basic thing is to have compassion. They are your enemy, but still they are human beings, and they need to be treated like human beings. So these are kind of like the fundamental things that they are trying to do. They try to follow the international humanitarian law. They try to follow the Geneva Convention. That is the basic thing that they are trying to do. The second thing is also to understand the role of the what we call civil disobedient movement. These are the government officers who refuse to support the junta. So many towns in Myanmar, the junta cannot control because a lot of the government staff are refusing to collaborate with them. This is also important to understand that the armed resistance is working hand in hand with them. And then the third one is we are inviting the soldier to lay down their arms, and they don't need to fight back or kill the junta. They lay down their arm and collaborate with the people's resistance. And up until now, thousands of soldiers has been collaborated. The information I gave to you this morning about the Korean Ministry of Defense and Daesan shipbuilding involvement in selling warships to Myanmar, this information is make it possible by a former military officer who laid down his arm. He's a naval officer who is being trained in Korea, and he took the risk for his family and everything. He bravely said, "I disagree with violence." And here is the information I have. When the Korean government sell the ship to Myanmar, they took under the name of civilian usage. But all the configuration are for the military, where they are going to put the heavy guns and all that. So all of that is made possible by a defected soldier. So this is also important to understand the other dimension of the armed resistance. I think the last one that I would like to say is the resistant groups or the alternative government has always opened the path to dialogue. We are ready to talk with the military junta anytime. And lastly, I think this is why we also need spiritual guidance. So far, we talk about international relationship, international norms and laws, and but from the religious sector, from the venerables, it's very important for the resistant group to get spiritual guidance, not to lose our compassion, not to lose Buddhist teaching, even if we are in the middle of violence. Thank you very much, Isho.
Hope you get the answer. Thank you, Sam. And we have the third question. So, and our Honorable, he want to answer that. And anybody from here, if you want to answer or give comment, please. But I give you the floor.
Thank you. One thing in the way of responding, two basic concepts I like to highlight. That is, one is anicca, things are changing. Whatever it is bound to change one day. So when the Britishers had the colonial rule in Asia, maybe people might have thought that it will continue like it ends, that things are changing. So Buddhism says that it is the nature, things are bound to change. Since we know things are changing and we continue to remain non-violent methods of responding, and that particular moment, when things change, and that is the first thing I want to share. And to be firm, I it is very difficult. I know those who are in the conflict, those are the people who are, see the difficulty, see the violence, and see loved ones losing their lives, children losing. So it is very difficult. But, while accepting that, I still again say this, the Buddha's teaching says things are bound to change. So keep on, and in a particular moment, it will be, that is one, the thing I want to share. And secondly, the conditional genesis theory. in this way of looking at our lives and understanding myself and the world, Buddhism never say that we are created. We are created as man, woman as woman. There is no such thing. So when this is the conditional genesis, that we are conditioned by other factors, that means no two men are equal or women are the same. They are different from one to the other. From this end to that end, there will be so much of differences, and this teaching suggests that to accept that differences. Then there will be male, there will be female, there will be transgender, there will be other, and this, based on this teaching, we don't have any conflict, and to accept and as they are. And this is what I can share with you. From based on the Buddhism, there is no conflict of seeing someone as different from male, female categories. There is nothing that that is what I think.
Is okay. How about the people who are not agree with that? How are we going to deal with them, or should we deal with ourselves?
Well, what I share here is not my own personal view. This is what based on the teaching of the Buddha, conditional genesis theory. It is the base. And then based on, we cannot name, this is the form, no,
Yes.
there is no.
So that's mean in Buddhism, there's no differentiate. So we may go to the second round of the questions. So we have one hand over there and two hands over there. We have three hands. Who raised first? I saw him at the back first. Can we keep the microphone? Sorry, I saw him first.
Thank you. I just wanted to really acknowledge there are several things that have been raised here this morning that are the first times that I have heard them in an INEB conference. One is to be addressing the really thorny question of the complementarity of nonviolent resistance and armed struggle. And I really appreciate that. The other is Wa's question. How are we going to open ourselves to the full range of human expression, full range of human manifestation? With due respect, I can understand the Buddhist teachings, Bhante, the way you describe them, but the Buddhist teachings have been used to enforce systems of patriarchy for hundreds and hundreds of years. And things won't change. Things don't change by themselves. Martin Luther King said, the arc of the universe is long, but it bends toward freedom. I don't think so. It bends if we bend it. And we can bend it here amongst ourselves, but we have to do it consciously. We can't do it just by a kind of just a smoothing over of differences and of doctrine, and to recognize that the doctrine has been used to impose harm on beings for hundreds and hundreds of years. So it's really a powerful moment to hear you raise this question. It's a question for all of us.
Thank you. So we come to the second.
Thank you very much. My name is
Your name,
Suchit.
yes?
My name is Suchit. I'm from Sri Lanka. I'm reflecting on some of the previous questions as well as the comments already shared from the speakers. When there is divides, we have to take a position. There's no engagement unless we take a position. So either we take the position of the oppressed, we take the middle position, or we take the position of the engaged with the oppressor. So my question and reflection in a way is, for me, when we say that there is different genders, it doesn't suffice for us to say that that's the diversity. It needs for us to be in solidarity and actually go and stand next to that genders and make changes in ourselves in doing that. And at the same time, that can help sometimes challenge and demonize also the oppressor. In a way, what Venerable Mananda is saying, the oppressor is a wounded person. The challenge for Buddhist communities, maybe more than other communities, is to recognize the woundedness of an oppressor and also see how you speak truth to power, engage with that oppressor. What is the engagement you have? And the quality of that engagement, I think for me, that's a matter. And then Venerable Dubop was highlighting the middle stance. How do we facilitate between these conversations when we have Trump supporters and then pro-democratics? How do we really engage and take a middle position and try to engage, or do we kind of principally talk about theoretical Buddhism and sit back? Do we really get to the middle, like the image that of the fires burning and Buddha sitting in the middle? How do we really have the courage to stand in that middle? I think these are my questions from listening to you, and I share them with you. Thank you.
Yes.
So very good morning to everyone. I'm Nawang Tashi from Ladakh, coming all the way from Ladakh to attend this international level, what we call it, Buddhism in a divided world. So first of all, I like to thank the INEB and the Jungto Society for giving us an opportunity to attend this seminar. So my question is that, till now we have discussed about the violence. But as far as I am concerned, there is something, the violence which is physical, which we can see from our eyes. There is another violence we cannot see. It is something hidden, For example, it's a structural violence. Violence which is created by so-called capitalist economy, Because of the production and consumption, the world is depend on the consumption and production. The more you produce, the more we have to consume. The more they will produce, we have to consume as well. So, for even if we take the examples of weapons, even the weapons are being produced in order to sell in the market. On the one hand, the capitalist economy say, oh, this we have to negotiate your defenses by sitting on a table. On the other hand, they are selling the large, quantity of weapons in order to sell their weapons in the market. So, how we can, because of the capitalist, economy, the way they are spreading this system, because of this system, many people are suffering, Though from the Buddhist point of view, from the Buddhist perspective, how we can resolve this issue at a global level? Because as a Buddhist, we always talk about what we call it, greed, hatred, and desire. These are the three poisonous things. On the other hand, the capitalist teachers try to teach us that greed is money, money is greed. So how we can resolve this issue at a global level from the Buddhist perspective? Because it is hidden, something hidden which we cannot see from our eyes. As far as physical violence is concerned, we can clearly see the violence which is going on around the world because of the dictatorial hegemony, dictatorial regime of the country. But as far as India is concerned, India is a very democratic, strong democracy we have. The democracy of the India is based on three basic principles: democracy, socialism, and secularism. As far as democracy is concerned, democracy is for the people, by the people, and of the people. And socialism means we have people can, we have no differences role, equality and other things. As far as secularism is concerned, people have the right to choose their own religion. This is the three basic principles that makes the Indian democracy so strong. They can overthrow the military regime at any time. Vice versa, we have, so far as your country is concerned, for example, we could take the example of Thailand, Burma and other country, military dictatorship so strong, they can overthrow the popular government anytime. But India is concerned, India in democracy is so strong, they can overthrow the, the military regime at any time. So my question is that, how can resolve this issue? The structural violence which is hidden, which is created by so-called capitalist economy.
I would say thank you for the question. We'll throw back to you and all of us as well for the answer. Before we have the panelists to respond, anyone want to respond? But any last comment, because we have the time run out a little bit. Who's want to be the last, or if you don't have, we will give it. Okay. That's the last, okay? And then we will have you and your ask to respond.
Hi, สวัสดีค่ะ. My name is Opor. I'm from INEB, Bangkok. I have heard over this conference, and so I'm working for the child protections in Buddhist institutions. So I am here to seek for friends who want to join hands to protect our the most vulnerable populations in the world. And if we are saying that this circle and Buddha welcome all beings and express love and kindness, I would like to invite us to, however, think and work forward the better future. When I heard Sam talk about the incident in Myanmar in the primary school, it broke the heart. And please don't just let it slip apart. Think of how as the spiritual leader and how can we save our future. So if anyone haven't signed up for the workshop yet, Child Protections Workshop. Thank you.
Thank you to raise the children up here, Upo. So, Winmoto, you want to respond? And maybe we had Jill to respond as well at the end. Please. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to respond to Huang. Her name, Huang. So, I wouldn't have been here sitting in front of you all had it not for the work of enlightened actors in Indonesia, because my group used to be also the most discriminated group at the time. Although I'm not from the the LGBT group, something, but I was heavily discriminated at the time, and we created an alliance with those actors in powers. We had a dialogue with them. Now here we are also. We are liberated. So we stand as equal. But I know there are many more homeworks to do. Like we haven't addressed like people like those with different sexual orientation, for example, LGBT groups. In my country, there are lots of them who are not recognized as well, who are treated differently, like what I was treated last time. So I believe it is now our time. I've experienced those things, and we experience greater freedom now, and it's our time also to work towards recognizing the dignity of the LGBT groups, especially in my country, because they are treated worse. I mean, it's not going to be easy, but at least we can make a conscious decision to make it a better place for LGBT community at least. So if we take this conscious decision to more inclusion, I believe, I don't know how long it takes, for example, to be as equal as we can expect, but at least we can see the light at the end of the tunnel. Thank you.
Thank you. Something to add, Jill?
Yes, and I'd like to thank you, Hua, as well, for the courage in bringing up this question. It really highlights the silencing of not only sexual orientation, but others who are marginalised. It makes me aware of my white privilege and all the other privileges that I have, and the importance of finding ways in our gatherings to be able to reach out beyond our differences, to reach out to different groups. We are doing this in our Zen group in Melbourne by having our names and pronouns, and it's a way of making visible or hearing. But I know in lots of other countries or lots of other places, there's such a long way to go. So very thankful to you for your courage to raise this question, and for us to be able to look at that and all the other forms of discrimination and marginalisation that occur. And we can be active towards that. We can reach out and welcome. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Jill, for the last comment. I'm sure we cannot answer all the question or comment, and our friends from Sri Lanka and from Ladakh. So your question or your comments will be addressed during these 2 days, 3 days, and beyond that from our conversation and conference for this time. Thank you so much. Thank you, Venerable. And thank you for all of our panelists. Our panelists will be here with us. If you have questions, you can talk with them individually. And thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We will stop live stream broadcast here. Thank you so much for the watchers of the YouTube online participants. Thank you so much. And my deepest apologies